notice down here, there's a single variable, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to isolate this variable. The binomial is already by itself, so I'm going to undo the operations. So I take it to a reciprocal power, 2/3. So here I get x plus 5, the 3/2 and the 2/3 cancel. Here I take the cube root of 8, which is 2. 2 squared is 4. Do I need plus or minus here? Was my denominator of this rational power an even number? Nope, so I don't need to worry about that. Solve for my x. I get x is equal to -1, and that would be my answer. Now, there's a slightly different step if you have multiple terms with variables. If you have more than one term with a variable, you're going to move every term to one side and compare it to 0. Okay? And so that's the pretty standard rule for that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to move everything to one side. So the 3x to the 3/4 I'm going to leave where it is, but I'm going to subtract x to the 1/2 from both sides, and I'm going to compare it to 0. Once you get this step, what you can then do is use the zero product rule to solve. And in order to apply the zero product rule, what we're going to need to do is remove common factors. So now this becomes, I have a binomial here, or it's not a polynomial, but I have two terms here. So I'm going to remove a common factor from both of those terms. They both share a common factor with base x. And when you take out a common factor, I'm just going to write it over here. When you take out the common factor, you're always going to take out the smaller power. So which is a lesser power, 3/4 or 1/2? So 1/2 is the lesser power. So that's the common factor I'm going to remove. And when I do that, I can find out what's left. It's going to have the same form as what I originally started with, one group minus another group of factors. And I'm going to subtract 1/2 from my powers here. So when I subtract 1/2 from the first set of terms here, 1/2 is equivalent to how many fourths? Okay, so this is really like subtracting 2/4. So I'm left with the 3, and I'm left with an x to the 3/4 minus 2/4, which is 1/4. Okay, and in the second term here, when I subtract 1/2 minus 1/2, I get 0. X to the 0 is 1. Okay, and so here's my factored form. And now what you can do is use zero product rule. Take x to the 1/2, set it equal to 0. Take 3x to the 1/4 minus 1, set it equal to 0. And solve each of these resulting equations. Okay, so the first one, again, if you were solving it, technically you square both sides. You get 0 squared, so one possible value of x is 0. And then on this problem here, we now have an equation with one variable. So we're going to isolate that variable. Add 1 to both sides. Divide by 3. And now we undo our operation. So we undo the power of 1/4 by taking both sides to the power of its reciprocal, 4. And that gives us 1 to the 4th, which is 1, over 3 to the 4th, which is 3 squared squared, or 9 squared, or 81. And so those would be our two solutions for that first problem. All right, if you have problems that have variables on both sides of the equation, okay, especially with different rational powers, once again, it's just a matter of entering the solve feature. So F2 algebra tab, select solve, type the equation again exactly as it appears. Use grouping symbols for any rational powers. And when you do this, separate comma x to tell the calculator what variable it is that you're looking to solve for. And when you hit enter, you'll get your solutions. If there are multiple solutions, like you see here, 0 and 1 over 81, make sure you include them as a list.